Okay, so we are live and in session once again. Hello, my friends, and welcome to our Friday podcast. There was a bit of a gap between this one and the last one because I did get sick. And yes, I am dressed up like one of those one of those Pinoy radio show hosts. So hello everyone. We just give a quick shout out to the early birds in the chat. We got Victor, Paul, Kat, Prim, Lion, Matt, and Decide. There we go. So, actually, what do you mean this is? Well, it's kind of interesting that we had just gone through the summer Steam sale. I hope you guys were able to get quite a few good ones. If you haven't already bought most of the things you need on Steam and are just sitting in a library with 100 other games. So I think that's something that that we all kind of have. It's kind of symptomatic, right? You see a sale, sometimes you even see a bundle pack. It's like, oh, I really want to play this game. I want to get it. You buy it, and then it sits in your library for the next 6 months. Or hell, sometimes years. Oh, man. And, you know, it's kind of interesting, no? That indie games really were, essentially, when they were starting out. Like, they were pretty much just an alternative to modern gaming when, shall we say, the corporate side, the more business side of games would kind of rear its ugly head and kind of get in the way of just making good games. So what started off kind of like as an alternative thing, almost like a hobbyist kind of gimmick, it has now evolved into its own monster of an industry, honestly. And we do now have games that are indie games, rather, that are in contention for Game of the Year. Now, unfortunately, an indie game has never won Game of the Year yet. But the fact that it's up there in contention just tells you the kind of quality that you can now expect from them, no? And as we get started with this discussion, let's just, of course, put some parameters, put some definitions into play, of course. So, indie games are, of course, games developed by either small-scale studios or single individuals, right? There's no backing of a major publisher. They're just independent developers. So they're gonna have smaller budgets. They're gonna be much smaller scale productions, no? But kind of interesting how it is a reflection or a repeat of history. Last time we were talking about the golden age of gaming and how in the 90s, right, people didn't have the name recognition to fall back on. They didn't have established brands yet. So they had to stand out among the competition through the use of innovation. Word of mouth was a big deal. We didn't really have too much internet functionality back then. So when word spread about your game because, wow, this thing is really freaking cool, then you'd really it would pick up steam. And now, it's kind of funny, where the modern game has, not all of them, of course, but there's quite a lot of modern games that have just become formulaic, kind of soulless husks that are just pumping out the same game year in, year out. It's now up to these indie games who, in an interesting, twist of fate, are the ones innovating because they themselves don't have the name recognition or an established brand yet. And it's interesting how when you really take a look at the most notable games, I prepared here a small list of some of the most notable ones. Thing is, remember, indie games are freaking massive. There is no chance in hell that we would be able to cover all of the notable ones. God forbid we cannot ever cover also all of the bad ones. Remember, we will get to that. We will get to that, because as much good stuff as they've brought to the table, there's also the darker side of things, of course. So, let's put it this way. Some people don't even know this, but Minecraft started off as an indie game. Now, of course, it was purchased by Microsoft. It has all of this extra budget and production, all these functionalities. But when Minecraft first started, it was an indie game too. And yeah, good old Notch. And if anything, I would argue that Minecraft was probably the major catalyst for people taking indie games seriously. No? And even now, the core team working on Minecraft is small. Yeah, they're just being backed up by Microsoft now. But in essence, it is still something of an indie game. It still maintains that spirit. And we all know what Minecraft is. It is, what? One of the best-selling games in history. I think it's in the top 5, top 3 maybe? So there's really no need to explain what Minecraft is. You guys all know what it is. I mean, we have our own server. And my house is now overgrown with vines, but that's not neither here nor there. What else? Notable ones. Among Us. Among Us is also an indie game. And it caught the world by storm, you know? It took the world by storm, rather. Like, it is so prevalent that a lot of people have gotten tired of the memes, of the sus memes. But it developed by a small team, and yet rivaling even full-scale productions. You guys remember at the time too, there was Untitled Goose Game. Just the title, Untitled Goose Game, was a meme in of itself, and the internet embraced it. Now, while not as revolutionary, not as Among Us, every time it's played, all you just hear is oh. And what is it? The game of Untitled Goose Game, you're literally playing as a goose. Hey, Rayman. But yeah, you're just playing as a goose, and you have a list of tasks, and for the most part, you're just trolling the community. And that's the game. And it works. It knows what it wants to do, it maintains a simple premise, and sticks to it. And lo and behold, it goes, you know, it catches on. Stealth goose action, yeah. And then we then have Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley is an incredible game in of itself. Imagine this was developed one person. It's a farming simulator. It's not the first of its kind, you know. Harvest Moon was the big deal before that. But when Stardew Valley came out, my goodness. I'm not the biggest fan of farming sims, but I was able to get a good amount of playtime from Stardew Valley. And it was just really impressive to me that was just made by one guy, and it is still constantly getting updated today. Now, to the point that when we see, you remember guys when we were watching either the Nintendo Direct or the Sony Game Show, one of the two, and we were getting all these trailers for other farming games. The big question we were asking was, well, how does it compare to Stardew? And suddenly this humble indie game created by one person is now the golden standard with which we hold all other farming sim games too. And that's wild. Man, by the way, if you guys have long flights and you have a way to play Stardew Valley on the plane, like if you have it on the Switch, my goodness, it will time will pass you by. Quick tip. Then we have Cuphead. Cuphead, that's another big game. Cuphead was just developed, small studio also, MDHR. And the biggest notable thing about Cuphead was the art style. It was reminiscent of the 1930s, 1940s style of hand-drawn animations, a la old school Disney and those kinds of animations back then. And to have it in game form is incredibly impressive. It is really, really freaking difficult. But my goodness, that game was phenomenal. And it just, you're gonna see this trend with these games, right? Some of them, they innovate through art style, like in Cuphead. Sometimes they innovate through gameplay, like the premise of Untitled Goose Game, Among Us. Sometimes the way they innovate is also through music. You remember those indie games that a lot of the Hololive members play? I think it is called one hand clapping, where you have to speak or to sing in order to interact with the environment. Those kinds of things. And then, man, Cuphead also has a fantastic soundtrack. The freaking brass band that they have, they knew what they were doing. They knew what they had on their hands, and they just went to town with it. Another one is Hollow Knight. This one is a personal favorite of mine. Hollow Knight was crazy good. I couldn't have imagined that a game about bugs, essentially, would be that compelling. The lore of that game, man, I 100%ed that game, and just unraveling the story, just unraveling the lore of it all was so mind-blowing to me. The music still holds up. I mean, the fact that they don't have most of the tracks, I think there are only like 1 to 2 tracks that actually have percussions and drums. The rest is strings. What? And then the other night, yes, Shovel Knight. That's why we meme on that's why we meme on Hollow Knight, and we talk about everything about Silk Song. Is like, we need info, but it's like, it's so hard to get all these breadcrumbs. But it just goes to show how much people love that game. The atmosphere, the art, the music, all of it encapsulates the full experience. And then, like I was saying, like the other night, Shovel Knight, which felt like a tribute to the DuckTales games. And it was oddly engaging as well. I didn't get too far with Shovel Knight. I think Hollow Knight was the one that really hooked me in. But I still enjoyed my time playing Shovel Knight too. And what else? We have a lot of games here to note. Another game that has gained internet infamy. 2015, Undertale. Undertale, I feel, gets an unfair reputation more because of the community rather than because of the game itself. I am honestly a huge fan of Undertale. I really enjoyed what it did. Super simplistic art style, very much reminiscent of what's this? Earthbound. Very reminiscent of the art style of Earthbound. Kept it simple, but very engaging story. Very interesting gameplay loop. It's like, it's the game, you don't actually have to kill anyone. And Toby Fox also contributed to the making of Marine's Treasure Box, which is an insane turn of events. My goodness. But what really captured people for Undertale, I would say, is really the simplicity of it. The beauty in the simplicity. You had just a few notable characters. You had a simple story. But the way it was told and presented was so enthralling. It really made you invest in these characters. It would make you invest in this small, wholesome little world. And yeah. And then the eventual sequel of Deltarune. And the only thing I will say about Deltarune is that I know it's not Toby's fault necessarily, but because I know it takes a long time to develop a game, of course. But the fact that there's chapter 1, chapter 2, and of course now we're having this massive gap in between chapters and between the content. The only issue there is like it is difficult to maintain the hype train over that long of a period of time. Like, as excited as people are for it, if the wait takes too long, you will inevitably run a little low on Steam. Now, you're not really gonna say that to the Silk Song hardcores, but you get my point. Then, what do we have here? We just finished playing this. Hades. In fact, the whole collection of Supergiant games. Those guys are ridiculous. They remind me, honestly, a little bit of old school Blizzard. Why does Supergiant remind me of old Blizzard? Because they don't put out too many games. They take their time. But once they do, they put out a game out there. It is incredibly polished. The gameplay loop is very innovative, very interesting. The voice acting is on point. The music is amazing. It started with Bastion. You could tell Like, oh, these guys know what they're doing. Now, I know some people didn't necessarily take to Pyre and Transistor, the other games that they had, but it felt like they collected all of the lessons they have learned from all the previous games they made and then created Hades. And for me, the way I describe Hades is like, it reminds me of a roguelite Diablo game. But instead of, it's like a roguelite ARPG, but it's a lot more action-oriented, a lot more, reflex-oriented, skill-based. Man. They knew what they were doing. And now, we're just waiting for the release of Hades 2. You guys know I'm gonna do the challenge there too. So yes, they are absolutely the epitome of quality over quantity, which was Blizzard in the old days. There would be massive gaps, massive years between the releases, but whenever they released something, it would capture your attention. You knew this was something worth your money. You knew this was something great. So yeah. Whew. Man. Then there are games, and you're gonna notice here, some games are tributes, no? It's like their own take on a beloved franchise. Like how Stardew Valley was its own take on a farming sim. And then we had, speaking of Diablo, when Diablo 3 came out, there were a lot of people who preferred the more old school style of Diablo 2 rather than 3. Diablo 2 is such a beloved game. And so we had Path of Exile and Grim Dawn, their own takes on the Diablo genre, on the ARPG genre. Yeah. Path of Exile 2 was just announced in one of those conferences that we watched together. Now, I'm personally a bigger Grim Dawn fan, but I did enjoy my time with Path of Exile as well. But my goodness, Path of Exile 2 looks incredibly polished too. And you're gonna see it. You're gonna see it a lot. There are so many great indie games out there that just remind you of the good old days. Like, oh, back when you could pay for a game at full price and got a full game. We didn't have to buy DLCs. We didn't have to do microtransactions, all this stuff. There was no, I think that's why a lot of the hardcore gamers who have gotten tired of the offerings of the modern industry will sing the praises of the indie game industry, because it really captures the spirit of the golden age of gaming. And I feel like that's why we're also drawn to it so much. Whew. You played you could play a full game with bad voice acting and you liked it. Paul. Classic example. Die, monster. You don't belong in this world. It is one of the most beloved games of all time, bro. Oh, man. That is classic cheesy 90s voice acting, and we love it. What other games did I have listed here? Oh, yeah. And then we also have those really fun meme games. It was not by my hand that I was once again given place. I was called here by humans who wish to pay me tribute. Man, you and I could probably recite that entire exchange by memory, and it would be amazing. Darkest Dungeon was listed here too, but unfortunately I haven't been able to play it myself, so I don't really have much insight to provide to you guys about it. Like I said, there are so many indie games out there, so many good ones, and there's only so many that I've played. It is on my to-play list. I also have here, oh my god, there it is. I also have listed here Ori and the Blind Forest. Talk about an emotional talk about emotional damage. My god, that game made me cry multiple times, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. The sequel too. Okay, right? Ori and the Blind Forest was already a fantastic game, like one of the most visually stunning, beautiful games I have ever seen. Yet it also plays really, really well. And then I said, there's a sequel, Ori and the Will of the Wisp. I'm like, well, I'll be very interested to play this. But I'm like, how do you improve on something that was already as good as the first game? And nope, they just did. They managed to do it. The combat was made so much more crisp and responsive. You know, they maintained the visual beauty of it. They still had the emotional gut punches of the storytelling. But now, my god, did it play like an action game. Some of the best indie games back then can pass off as a bona fide AAA franchise at this day. And yes. I mean, on that point that we were talking about, like, Hades was such a quality game that it was a Game of the Year contender at one point. Another one was Celeste, which was a classic, really friggin' hard platformer. I played the game. Personally, it was not for me. So unfortunately, I don't really have too good of an impression of it. I mean, it was good for what it was, but I also felt a little bit like, I don't know, there was something about it that didn't quite hit for me. There were just certain things there that just were not for me. It's just one of those things. I was not the target audience. So some of the themes they had, while I appreciate what it was trying to do, it did not resonate with me in the way that I would have hoped. But it's just what it is, you know. It is what it is. Okay. What else? Some indie games, let me see here. Some indie games, there we go, are... Some indie games almost invent genres. Or reinvent, or like push genres forward. Like what you just said. Jump King, Getting Over It, Only Up, Pogo Stuck, man, all the rage games that we know and love and hate. These are indie games. These are indie games. The most notable ones. Yeah. Oh, hold on. The light's a little overblown. Hold on. With that. There you go. Much better. Rage of Mages was good in the RPG indies, and then it was eventually acquired and turned into Alod's Online. Yeah. There's a Jump King sequel. Oh no. Oh no. And I haven't even finished the first game. I know I should. I know I should. I know I should. Alright. Real suck. Well, yeah, considering the success of that game. One more thing, well, not one more thing, there are a lot of other games here. Another one I wanted to mention was, like I said, one of the indie games that push genres forward. Vampire Survivors. Vampire Survivors. There's that section. Paul was waiting for that. See, the thing is, the survival game was not something new. But the way they executed it was so addictive and brilliant. And what was the whole thing about VS? What made it so compelling? Once again, the simplicity. The simplicity of it. All you need to do is move. And then it attacks for you. All you need to do is worry about dodging the enemies. And yet, it's so compelling. The way you ramp up in power in Vampire Survivors is so addictive. It is so satisfying. If you're a power tripper, my god, that game can provide new levels of power tripping, especially if you use some of the most broken secret characters in the game. The sound effects, the visuals, like, you know, you're just here, you're throwing little axes, you know, Castlevania axes, and then you upgrade it, suddenly you're throwing a ring of sides all around you and it's just cutting everything in half. I'm like, what the heck? And then you can just gain even more and more and more power. You get stronger and stronger, you get more upgrades, and you just, you know, it is just this ramping difficulty where at the start of the game, you're struggling a little bit, and then by the end of it, everything, you can just stand there and watch as everything dies in front of you. Yeah, man. Well, let me see, what else were you guys mentioning? Some of your favorites. Rocket League! Okay. I absolutely was crap at Rocket League. But it was still enjoyable. I've watched a few pro matches of Rocket League, and I haven't felt as inadequate ever since. I did not feel like more of a noob than when you watch freaking pro matches of Rocket League and they're just flying in the air doing all these acrobatic tricks. You're like, what the? I'm like, I can barely get driving well enough on the ground, and you guys are flying in the air. Like, what? Yeah, skill ceiling on that game is wild. Oh man. What else? You guys are saying you could consider Dota as an indie game. Yes. True, to be fair, yes. Dota was made from scratch. It was just made in the Warcraft 3 world editor. But it became its own thing, defined a genre in the MOBA, and then it spawned League of Legends eventually too. But like, what? My goodness. And then we have, what else you guys were saying? Hotline Miami. Yes. That is insane. Hotline Miami is a completely insane game. Very difficult. Very crazy. Henry Stickmin is an acid trip. Henry Stickmin was a reminiscent of the the Flash animation era. Back then in the, what, early 2000s? Just now 20 years ago? Anyway, and then we also have the OG Super Meat Boy. Yes. The OG Rage game. And it would tell you how many times you died and how long it took you to clear the level, because because that's the way it is. And then we also have I'm just looking at all the titles you guys are writing down in the chat right now, and it's amazing to me. Like, that's how good indie games have gotten. Like, we have all played quite a handful of indie games that have really, that have really made us feel great about playing them. It's just been very enjoyable experience. And like I said, we also have now especially as HoloLive fans, we have all the HoloLive fan games. And they're crazy good too. We have, just off the top of our head, right? The two games, Idol Showdown and Holo Cure. What? And to think, when we were just talking about like Holo fan games, we had Small Ame, which creates I don't know how Small Ame managed to create so many rage streams. But it just goes to show you that a lot of them in HoloLive are not platforming OGs. Nui Quest. Yeah, their own games will be indies. Yeah. And then Holocure, Idol Showdown, fighting games, and like their own Vampire Survivors. Holo Earth is an indie game. Yeah. There you go. Holo Funk. Yes. Holo Funk, which is based on Friday Night Funkin'. They had the Council RPG and all of these crazy fan games. Okay, oh my god. I saw someone in the chat though. There is an EG RPG game in development. That definitely counts too, Kat. That absolutely counts as well. But I saw someone say it earlier. We cannot talk about all the good that indie games have done without also acknowledging some of its greatest flaws and faults. Someone mentioned Mighty Number 9. Oh my god. Well, let me just say this. With indie games come a precautionary tale. The age-old saying of anyone can make a video game, right? That's the thing that indie games, that's kind of like the idea that indie games push. That anyone can make a video game. If they had the passion, if they had, some coding know-how, you could make a game yourself. Ooh, no way. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So the thing is, with all of the crazy good games that we have out there is how many times more bad games, we were coining a term for a little while of like Steam crash, or like the stuff on Steam that would just be bundled into, that would be bundled into packs because nobody would buy these games directly, And it's like, how do I say this? Like, there are so many games out there, so many other games out there that, that are just outright bad games. But then there are also those games that are quite good, but are just unfortunate in timing. They just they just go under the radar. They're unlucky, And even in the production of the games that we know and love, there have been a lot of tumultuous development stories with some of these games. If you guys are familiar with the development story of Cuphead, the developers had to mortgage their houses just to get that game, just to get the funding to push that game out. Now, I'm glad, of course, we're very happy for them that they managed to, put out the game and it became as successful as it was. But can you imagine if it didn't? Can you imagine they remortgaged their houses, and what if the game didn't work? Right? That's startling. Really went all in there. They're just lucky that their bet paid off. And now they have a DLC. But if it didn't, yikes. And those are the precautionary tales with indie games too. Like, it's not all just sunshines and rainbows. There's a dark side to it too. There's a lot of stuff that goes there that a lot of people don't really take notice, right? It's all or nothing. Yeah. Which is why there are, oh man, it kind of feels, I really don't want to come off like I'm pretending to be some sort of authority or anything like that. But there are so many passion projects out there that, oh, I'm making an indie game that does this, this, and this. And I'm just thinking, yes, but I can compare your game to all of these other titles. What's your unique selling point? And I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy who rains on your parade. If what you're making is comparable to a lot of other projects. But from the business side of things, if we're trying to be realistic about this, you really have to innovate. And if what you're doing is just par for the course, you're not gonna stand out with all, when you compare to all of the other games that we've just talked about. Like, oh, this thing is a Souls-like. I'm like, okay, but that's not enough anymore. What about your Souls-like is different? What makes it stand out? Or, oh, I'm making a batch 3 puzzle game. I'm like, okay, how does it hold up to Candy Crush? I know they're not gonna like that. They're not gonna like that. Oh, they're being compared to a mobile game. But there's a reason why that's the competition. Gotta out-innovate your competition. Or like, oh, it's a Souls-like with big old, yeah. Really is the execution of it. And that's the thing too, no? When you see the games that are on Steam, the biggest indie games, you're like, oh, one man could do that? Like when you hear the story of Stardew, it's like, oh, one guy did that? That means I can do it too. No. It's like, don't interpret it that way. Like him being a one-person dev team, that's the exception. Do not follow the example unless you really, really know what you're doing. If anything, you should take these things as precautionary tales, because you have to ask the question, right? After all the time and effort they put into developing that game, what if it didn't sell? What if it didn't luck out? What now? What then? And that's the really tough part. And now, okay, chat. This is like tangenting a little bit. Oh, not tangent, but it's tapping into another topic that I do want to talk about in the future. But you make a Patreon. But another thing, Takes-Two won Game of the Year, and that's considered an indie. That's right. It did. That's right. But anyway, what I was saying is AI generated games. And when you see the discussion around AI generated assets for your games, it gives me concern. It makes me a little bit concerned that now there are these overly excited folks, very passionate folks, who unfortunately come off as a little bit misguided because they think that, oh, the AI can do the work for me. It's like, you can have an AI assemble a level for a game, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the instincts or the artistic sense, the game designer sense, to create compelling levels, to create compelling environments, to create these games that will really capture the attention of people, hold it there, maintain it. You have the tools, but it's like, you may have the tools, but do you have the knowledge to maximize those tools? It's one that's, you know what I mean? They think that, oh no, I can bridge the skill gap because of the AI, because of the work that AI does. That's really not true. Most of these game developers, environment artists, character artists, they've had years upon years of experience of work, of like designing, drawing, creating all of these things. They understand what makes a good design. They understand what compels a player to do this or that. Not all the time, I know, but just for the sake of the argument, no? That's the kind of experience that is not available to you through AI. It can make something for you, but it doesn't mean that, oh, I can now bridge the gap of how many years of these professional artists. Not quite. Not quite. Some of you are saying be ready for a massive amount of boring and similar games. Yeah, it could become formulaic if AI is the one designing it. You're losing the human aspect that is making the game so much more compelling. So yeah, it'll get worse. Hey Lux, the current topic is how indie games created by AI are creating a wave of people with misguided passions. Yeah. Now it's missing the human touch, the soul of it. Correct. So yeah, I also wanted to, you guys already pointed it out. You can't relate to a machine. That's right. It's like, let's put it this way. You make a game, platforming game, similar to the original, Super Mario Bros. On the NES. You generate it through AI. It's like, will it be as compelling as Mario? Not quite. You may have the tools to generate something similar, but there was something else that could not be generated by AI that made those games so successful. And that just is a little bit concerning. Yeah. Games have stories exactly and entirely because the creators and devs have something to share. True. Very true. An AI just generates things. It doesn't tell stories. It doesn't give you experiences. It just makes things. It's up to you to take those things and turn them into something else. Yeah, the difference between listening to an EDM track and a symphonic classical piece. Yeah. In as much, I have to admit this idea, in as much as there's the rise of EDM, I still love hearing real instruments in songs. I mean, okay. Let's put it this way, chat. Let me put it this way. AI generates the levels, right? Procedural level generation. And what did we get with procedural level generation? First release, No Man's Sky. Just let that sink in. First release. I know No Man's Sky is now in a much better state. But first release, rough. It was like, yeah, we have how many billions of planets that are procedurally generated? But they were a lot of empty, soulless husks. And then what happened? They went in, they improved the game, they fixed it up. What did they do? They added the human touch to the AI generated tools. That's why Diablo works. Yes, the dungeons are procedurally generated in Diablo 2, but there are people who adjusted and made made adjustments to it and tweaked it in such a way that even if it's procedurally generated, it's still fun. So that's what I'm saying there. That's what I'm saying there. Yes, Hades has procedurally generated levels as well, but the generation follows templates. Yep. There's still that human touch in it. Like, yes, these are procedurally generated, but these are also intricately designed by people in the first place to make sure that it still plays well, to make sure that it's still making a good experience. So that's where we're at. And to correct the point that I mentioned earlier, thank you for pointing it out to me, you guys. But in recent times, yes, you're right. We have had indie games winning Game of the Year in more recent times. We were seeing them in 2017, 18, 19, I believe. Like, some of them were in contention. But now in the 2020s, people will gladly give their Game of the Year award to indie games. And I'm not just talking about the Game Awards, no? I mean, because even in the Game Awards, they actually did already award Game of the Year to It Takes Two, which was an indie game. But the really compelling part is, even outside of that, even with like other organizations, publications and whatnot, they will gladly, give their Game of the Year award to indie games. So it's like what do you call it? Huh? What's this? You want to bring up Dwarf Fortress? That whole game is my god, Dwarf Fortress is a monster of a game. I am very intimidated by that game. I am very intimidated by that game. I just know of it, but I have not played it myself because it makes me feel very, very small. The complexity of it, right? But that's all I really wanted to Oh, what's that? What's that, Jeff? You're saying the biggest indie game? Oh, I mentioned that at the start of the stream. Yeah, you entered late. Minecraft was the first game I mentioned. Hollow Knight and the Knights have been discussed as well. You guys were late. MC is pure procedural generation. Yep. Okay, so, that really boils down what I wanted to say about, the indie games. In as much as they've provided such great experiences to us as gamers. And there is a massive and ever-growing collection of great games that are both on Steam, on Game Pass, on the storefront of your choice on whatever console that you're on. They will just keep going, and they are constantly improving. It provides a wonderful break from a lot of the formulaic stuff that you get constantly offered that are just pumped full of microtransactions in the AAA industry. Not saying necessarily that all AAA games are bad. I'm not sweeping it, I'm not putting it, not making, huge sweeping statements like that. But on those days when you do get tired of those offerings from the AAA industry, indie games do feel like, they're a callback to a much more fun time. Like the 90s feels like you're going back to the golden age of gaming. But like I said, just because these indie games give the idea that anyone can make a video game doesn't mean you should. Doesn't necessarily mean you should. People underestimate to this day just how freaking difficult it is to make a good game. And there are so many factors to consider, so many things that can go wrong, so many things that need to go right for your passion project of an indie game to reach anywhere near the heights of the games that we discussed today. Yeah. And like I said, there are way too many games out there for us to discuss in one single podcast, but it's kind of just like a teaser and an appreciation for all the good stuff that it brought to us, no? Alrighty then. So I think that we've reached an hour. That's the time we have for this session. So next time I have a very interesting discussion. I'm going to want your opinions on that for sure. So the next podcast episode we have, I want to talk about the pursuit of realism in gaming and how it sometimes actually takes away from a game being a game. Realism in video games. When is too much? When is it too much? Something that not a lot of people consider, but it was a topic that we discussed a lot in when I was studying game dev, and I feel like that's a discussion that would be really compelling to present to you guys. You have a lot to say about that topic? Perfect. Because we're coming from the indie games, which is all about these compelling art styles, very unique experiences. Then realism. When is it too much? When does it actually start taking away from the game? Alright, T-Chat. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you liked that little discussion we've had about indie games. I hope you got some good stuff in the Steam sale. Or if not, looking forward to what's gonna come out on Game Pass, eh? Alright, so with that, I would say our session is adjourned. Everybody, please take care of yourselves. Have a lovely rest of your day, afternoon, and evening. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the weekly roundup. Alright? With that, this is Senator War Chief, signing out. Otsu Sen. Where is the ending screen? Oh, there it is. Bye!